Hi,
How are y'all
everybody.
doing?
Welcome back to the Sweet Talks podcast. I'm Rye.
And I'm
Hello,
Kay.
and
What's
I'm
up, y'all?
Chai.
We are hoping to move our conversation forward today, just by digging a little deeper into some issues regarding pop culture and identity. And we have a lot to get through, so let's quickly go ahead and jump right in.
Yes, okay. So, in our last episode, we left off with a discussion about what makes someone like a true fan along the lines of like gatekeeping and ownership of fandom. So, today we're actually going to extend that topic to try and cover a bit more of a hot issue identity, in particular racial and gender identities, as they're expressed in Korean and Japanese pop culture. And as well as how that translates, if at all, to life on the ground level. But like, disclaimer, obviously that's a huge topic. So we're like barely scratching the surface. Hopefully we'll have deeper conversations about this later on, but we just want to get started.
Right, exactly. So to start off, at least a surface level conversation in terms of identity, we're going to be discussing a group called Black Swan. Black Swan is a group that is under DR Entertainment. However, there are two members in the group who are not fully Korean. And if you are interested in K-pop, if you've been in the K-pop, I don't want to say grind, but if you've been in the fandom, you've known that there have been multiple groups that have more non-Korean or even have Korean members or have members that are from other countries, so foreign members. But this group particularly have two individuals that are particularly interesting. One is Fatou. She is from Senegal, but she's also the main rapper. She also speaks like 5 languages or something like that, which is like crazy. It's amazing.
Her mind.
Oh my gosh, it's so and I can barely speak one, but um, uh, but then there's also Leia. Leia is an individual who is, I think she's biracial. She is Brazilian and Japanese, but was born in Brazil, and she's the maknae of the group, as well as I think the visual and the lead dancer. So we're going to be talking about Black Swan and the makeup composition of them, but also like how the fans reacted to her, international versus Korean. But there's a lot of controversy that's happening with this group. So we're going to start off with them, and we're going to go into other topics such as like the Blackpink documentary, if we have time, other Asian groups or Asian members in groups that are from other Asian countries. But yeah, we're just going to start off with her. And I want to actually hear. I don't want to step in with my thoughts just yet. I want to hear from you all. Like, what are your first thoughts?
I mean, personally, when it comes to Black Swan, I'm a little put off by the promotional aspect of how the group came to be, as like a reconstruction of Rania, after they lost a few members, namely Alex, who was their, I guess it's a different group, but was a Black individual in Rania. And now they're coming back and promoting as a different group, yet with a similar kind of concept. And then also you have this new individual from Senegal, and she's very much front and center. And I wonder sometimes if it's, if they're handling her incorporation in the most respectful way. But I'd rather hear more about it from Kay, I think, because I feel like she has a lot to say on the topic.
I do. I have some thoughts, obviously. I think just based off of first impressions, right? Black Swan, it's a captivating name, and I feel like it says a lot about, I guess, what they're trying to do. Like, are they trying to claim that they are the kind of like the scapegoats of the industry, or kind of like the weird family member of the K-pop industry? I don't know. I was thinking about that too. I was like, the name, very interesting name. Like, are you already trying to claim that you're ostracized from this industry, so therefore it makes sense for you to be different and be unique. Like I'm gonna be the one to change the game, and it kind of came out that way, in terms of my first impression based on the name. And then when I start seeing the trailers, or rather like the teasers for the new group, I was intrigued. Like honestly, I think anyone who sees members that represent someone that's from my culture and from who shares the same identity as me in one way or another is exciting, and it's new, and it's like, wow, I'm really looking forward to whatever this group is going to be doing with their music. And at the end of the day, like, what's most captivating to me, aside from the aesthetic of K-pop, is the music. So I'm like definitely intrigued at what the sound is going to look like. I mean, what the sound is going to sound like, as opposed to what it's already looking like to me. So like right off the gate, I was like, okay, I see where this is going. But then the song came out, and I was just like, okay, sounds pretty familiar. It doesn't seem anything too different than what we already know. And then I started going back down to like the line distribution. Obviously, the line distribution for the two most foreign members out of the entire group. And I was surprised / disappointed / underwhelmed / confused about how certain members were kind of represented in the music aspect of it all. And that being Fatou, her kind of placement in the song was very weird, and I can easily compare that to Rania as like a former form of this group, and to see how they've changed the representation of their foreign members in the group. But is it better? Does it say anything more or less than what's already been demonstrated before? Demonstrated. Wow, I kind of like, all right, demonstrate. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, I see where they're going. And then like, I follow Alex. I'm a huge fan of Alex, who is the former member of Rania, who was identified as the first Black member within the K-pop industry. Like, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case and what we mean by Black member, right? That's very, how should I say, subjective to people's opinions, because we can talk a lot about multiculturalism in South Korea, which we'll definitely get into as well. But I say that to say, I don't even know how to formulate my words, because I don't want to offend anyone. And I think what they're trying to do is something that the industry is kind of trying to break through this mold that's already been set in stone as prior before. And I think they have good intentions, but kind of the outcome came out very differently than I supposed it would.
I saw the song, because you know when like you look at YouTube and you get like a preview of what the video is going to be about based off of like the little flashing of the elements of the song. I was looking at it and I was like, okay, this may seem really like on the, I don't want to say the dark side, but mysterious, or something is going to be happening, not too colorful. So I was like, okay, there's not going to be like a severely colorful video or anything like that. And so I clicked on the song, I was listening to it, and I was intrigued. I ain't gonna lie, I was interested in like how they were doing, you know, the dances. Like that one dance was pretty cool when they were on the wall. That was it. That was like lit. But I was, of course, was really looking at Fatou. I was really looking at her and the way that she was placed, in terms of like how they used her in the song. And like I agree, like she had that not that many lines. But also I don't know if she blended with the group well, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that was done on purpose. Because I know one thing that we always talked about or like think about is the way in which a lot of idol groups try to have it where everybody is kind of on the same or similar baseline, so like no one outshines or another. But she's like obviously tall, like tall. And that's not, you know, genetics. That's not anything to like hate her for. But I I don't know. It was something about the way in which they were using her that was kind of like. But I support her, right? Like if this is her dream and this is what she wants to do, I completely support her. I think another thing that kind of made me concerned was, are they using her in order to just get attraction and not treat her well on the sidelines? Like, does she feel like she's part of the group? Does she feel like she has to, like, I don't know, like obviously she's breaking a lot of boundaries and barriers, but is there a lot of weight put on her in order to become an idol, or to fulfill expectations of her that are placed on other people that are just unfair for her? So I don't know her story. I don't know, like, you know, her experience. I don't know what's going on with her, in terms of like how she has to navigate that space. But I also see that it's a lot of international fans who are questioning this. Apparently, I don't know too much because I don't speak Korean, so I don't know what's said in the Korean community. But it seems that a lot of people are supporting her. A lot of people are supporting her. A lot of people are like, yes, we're gun ho for this. And it's really the international fans who are either saying she doesn't belong because she's black, which I say, this gets to the question who belongs in K-pop, which we touched on a little bit last time. But also too, like a lot of people are, as like us, are a little bit concerned about what is DR's entertainment purpose of having her in the group. And I, as a fellow black woman, I'm more interested in making sure that she feels like she has a place there. I'm not really concerned about all the people who are against her. I'm just concerned about, is she doing something that she wants to do, and she is not having to, obviously within bounds, because we're going to talk about this later, but obviously within bounds of the entertainment, but she's being able to be authentically her as much as she can be, and is not being used for as a commodity. But Ryan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of really great points, Chai. My first reaction when I saw the teaser for Black Swan was like worry for her specifically, because being a K-pop idol is hard enough, you know, just if you are a Korean person growing up in that society, kind of the industry itself is so difficult. And then you add onto that being a female K-pop idol, which is extra scrutiny, and then you are a foreigner, which is extra scrutiny, and then you are a black foreigner. And I was so worried about the treatment either that she would receive from like the audience or from within the industry itself as well. Um, and for that reason, I was paying really close attention to the debut, and I was watching some of the stages and things like that, the live stages, and it didn't ease my worries really, because I felt that there wasn't a lot of group cohesion. It felt like they weren't working as a unit yet. And I was like, did the company rush this to get her out there as a gimmick? Because if so, that feels the kind rude, disrespectful to her, because she will likely receive more backlash from any lack of cohesion that is felt. And at the same time, she's going to have so much on her shoulders. She, like you said, she speaks like 5 different languages. She's almost like the international cultural ambassador of the group. Like, she's the one who is translating what they're saying into all of these different languages for all of these different audiences. And in that way, it's like she is clearly extremely intelligent. She's talented. She's beautiful. She's all of these things. But I worry about that pressure on her and how the industry will react. And like you said, international fans are, I haven't really looked at what the Korean fans are saying, so I'm gonna hold back there. I'm not gonna say anything about that. But the international fans are already, that's enough. That's enough for me to see, to be like, well, clearly, like, maybe this should have been handled more carefully. There should have been more fine tuning that happened before this debut happened. And I understand that K-pop is an industry that is go, 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 and there's no time for, stepping back and fine tuning all of these things if you're rebranding a group. If it's a newly debuting, like no one knows any of the members, this is unheard of, then yeah, they do fine tune it because they have the time to do that. They can switch out members however they want until it's ready and make them work together for however long, doing the same choreography, the same songs over and over again. But I worry about how that came to be in this particular group. What are your thoughts on that, Kay?
Of course, I share the same sentiments, not simply because of, what everyone else is saying about it, but I think because I can relate to her in some sort of way, in terms of like feeling like the token Black person or tokenized person in any situation, just simply because of my identity, and like people can profit or mobilize it in a way that less supports me and more supports the brand. And I think it can easily become a case of that with her, but also again, like, people are like, well, she walked into it, and so that's her choice, and that's what she wants for herself. But at the same time, you want to feel supported. Like, you want to feel at least you have some sort of dignity when you're walking into an industry that's already cutthroat as it is. Like, these industries pass themselves off as a place where you're not just a solo artist, you're in a company where you are, with people that love you for who you are and are all talented in their own right. You know what I'm saying? And oh, Sherry, that's a really interesting comment you made there. The first thing I saw Karina is to say that she was pretty and looked like Rihanna. And that's an interesting comment to make of itself, because Rihanna is a global phenomenon. She's a major star. And I think a lot of people easily like take, and that's what we're talking about in terms of tokenizing, or the tokenizing Black people in any industry, but related to this conversation about how K-pop has kind of utilized artists like her into the industry is very interesting to me, because K-pop was not made for Black people, and there's obvious examples of how K-pop has been or felt kind of exclusive. Yes, we might enjoy it. Yes, we might have singers, songwriters or producers who are a part of the behind the scenes that are American producers, and some of them are Black producers that go to Korea. Similarly to Alex's background, where she went to a what do you call it? A writing workshop / seminar in Korean, which is where she was recruited for her work, and she kind of like went all in for that opportunity, like and like many producers and many other people who work behind the scenes that don't really get seen. But that doesn't say, trying to figure out how to word this because it's very difficult. I don't want to feel as though I'm like completely judgmental about the way she's being portrayed or projected in K-pop. Like, yeah, that might be a flattering comment to say that, oh, she reminds them of Rihanna, and like, yes, it's K-pop is a sound that people are very familiar with nowadays, and they love it because it sounds familiar and things like that. But I think there is a danger behind it as well that people don't really pay attention to, and I think that danger is not being able to appropriately honor or recognize people, and even like Koreans who are like the pros of the industry, like giving them their props, and then also like recognizing that Korean society is changing, I think, for for the better in a different direction than people are anticipating it to change. And I think that might be an issue down the line, like just simply related to kind of Korea's like global expansion, and is that going to at all deteriorate their preservation of their own identity? And is K-pop threatening that that identity that they want to hold on to? There's a lot that we can talk about with that, and I'm getting a little flustered because there's so many different directions. But I think what I'm looking for is like kind of a care behind it, like a genuine like admiration for her work, not only as a Black woman, like making a change into the K-pop industry, but I think that there are changes happening around the world, and everyone should be accepting and open-minded to that, and not, you know, using her as a prop. I mean, I don't want to go that far, but I feel like that could be the case, and it might be popping right now. Hence why we're talking about her right now, and not in a negative way. But I think we ought to be cautious about that. Yeah, that's kind of like my point right there. And I know that you want to jump in, Chai.
Yeah.
As well.
I just want to jump in the earlier parts that points that you made earlier. One, the idea of her being or looking like Rihanna. And it's like not all Black people look the same, right? And I noticed that as a person who loved K-pop, especially when I was younger, where a lot of idols, when they were talking about like who their favorite rapper or singer are, it was always kind of like the same. There were some who were like kind of outside. And it was always like Chris Brown, Rihanna, Beyonce, things like that. And obviously, like part of that is due to their international fandom, or their international presence. But I remember reading, or I think I was watching something where a lot of these idols, when they're in training, they're told kind of what to say, or kind of be like, this is the artist that you should say that you like. So kind of like orchestrating their image down to the bone of who they are or who they like or who they listen to, even if that may not be who they actually listen to. And I don't negate that possibility of some of these idols actually liking Rihanna, Beyonce, but it just seems a little bit questionable when almost all of the idols are saying the same exact person and not like other groups or other people. Like, I haven't heard of NSYNC, Blink 182, like, you know, Rod Wave. Like, y'all haven't heard of anybody else, but it's just kind of questionable to me. But also this idea of like comparing people to the same kinds of Black people, because I think that one could easily let itself into a conversation about stereotypes, which I'm also very concerned about. Is like, it's like, oh, you're a great. I don't want to get too far ahead of that comment, but it was just particularly interesting, that comment, Sherry, and I appreciate it. But it just got me thinking about how much Black people are compared to each other, or it's even used as a compliment. But it's like, I'm my own person, kind of going to the point that Kay was saying. It's like, I'm my own person. So yeah, that was one point that I wanted to make. I forgot what the second point is. So if it comes back to me, I'll I'll jump back in. But yeah, Rye, you could go.
Oh, okay. You got my brain kind of working on something, because I started to remember hearing people, like visibly foreign looking people in Korea, talking about how they would get comments like, you look like insert celebrity. And for Black individuals, it was so often Obama. You look like Obama. Which, compliment. You know, you look like Rihanna. It can be a compliment, but it's not necessarily true. We can look at someone like Fatou and say, I personally, I don't see that much of a resemblance between her and Rihanna, or any resemblance. Yeah. But you know, it often went for everybody. White people, everyone looks like Brad Pitt, you know. Which is not the microaggression that it is when you're saying, you know, all Black people look like X, Y, and Z, because of the denial of Black identity and individualism in so many kind of sectors of international society. Right? But at the same time, I am almost certain they mean it as a compliment. No arguments for me that she's gorgeous. She's beautiful. So if they're saying, oh my gosh, she's so pretty, I agree with that part. Her legs. So long because she's so tall. And I'm like, you know, I would be looking up at her like, oh my gosh, queen. But I mean, Bernie, as you said in your first episode, you're shorter. You would be like,
yeah. I'm literally 4'11", so she is literally like,
she's like up there. You're craning your neck. But you're also very right that it doesn't even always make sense how a lot of idols are taught to give kind of the same answers. There will be like a rock band that's like, oh, they'll be like, who's your inspiration? Oh, Kanye West, you know. Mm-hmm. You don't make music anything like Kanye West music. And that's not to say that things about Kanye's music can't be inspiring, but if you're listing the same artists every time, it starts to be like, well, then if that's your inspiration, why are you not doing that? Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't always make sense. I'm getting the feeling that there's a lot of people who want to jump in right now, so I'm gonna go Chai first.
Yeah, I wanted to add, because I remember the point that I want to make, but I also want to acknowledge Sherry's comment. So the point that I wanted to make at first was the second point that I think, Kay, that you was making a lot earlier on, in terms of like, you know, who gets to say what is K-pop. And I know we talked a little bit about this earlier in the last conversation, but in this conversation, in terms of like Fatou, like being in the K-pop group, I remember seeing comments under the video itself of a lot of Black individuals who are like, she gives me inspiration to join K-pop, which before, as we were saying, especially in the last video, of like how, you know, at first K-pop was just something that we were enjoying. But for both of you, viewers, I was not take part in any of the dances, but you all danced to it, right? You all were like literally learning the choreographies and performing it in front of so many people at our college, that I so happy get to say that I was one of the viewers and was like, yes, my friends. But at first, I don't know if it will go through your mind, depending on what Kay wants to say. We could talk about it a little bit about, like, you know, it's one thing to want to dance to the choreography, but it's another thing to actually want to go through that whole process of becoming an actual idol. And for her, she brings a lot of inspiration for people who at first thought that K-pop was just a Korean thing that we were just enjoying. But then because it's trying to, you know, branch out into the international sector, and that there are, you know, members who are not fully Korean. Yes, they are Asian if you think about like Japanese and Chinese idols. But for those who are from the West, for example, white, Black, Latinx, anything like that if they have a space for that. And also too, I know we're talking about race, but also thinking about sexuality, like gang members. I know there's some soloists who are gay, trans individuals. I don't know if there are in any of K-pop, or there's even room for them. Okay, good, because I didn't. I have
a famous one.
Okay, good. We could talk about it either a little bit in this episode because I want to make sure Kay jumps in. But or even disabled individuals. Like I don't know that much, so I don't know if there are English. I don't know if there are, but it's really in terms of Fatale. I think she brings a lot of inspiration as well as concerns and curiosities. She brings a lot of inspiration for those who want to join in. And I also just want to highlight Sherry's point, who says, just wanted to add that most of the time there's a specific list of songs that trainees practice to during their trainees days, which tends to be company wide. So I think that leads to the idea of, a lot of them saying the same kind of artists like Kanye and stuff like that. But I don't know if we want to talk about Blackpink and the things that we saw in the documentary itself, because I think that leads to what we're saying right now in terms of people, in terms of authenticity, like, saying what you actually like, doing the music you actually like, talking about your inspirations, but also being molded by a company that is still at the end of the day are trying to get money off of you. That sounds a very morbid way of putting their careers, but
it's the truth.
It's the truth. But before we jump into that conversation, depending on what Kay wants to bring, I want to make sure that Kay has the platform to say her thoughts.
No, think back to me. I feel like we're like we are all thinking the same thing. But what I wanted to kind of like bring up was also Sherry's point in how, again, holding it back to the center of the conversation is like, who has a place in K-pop? And I think you bringing up Blackpink like lit a light bulb in my head, because that's kind of the direction I wanted to go to. For those of you who don't know, Blackpink is a very well-known female K-pop group who's recently made their debut, I would say, in the last 2 years in America, essentially. And that's how they've kind of reached like an exponential fame like ever since their kind of like debut. Like I remember them coming out in like 2016 or something like that, and they had their first single, and it did really, really well because everyone's been anticipating a new girl group from YG. They've been hinting at it for so long, and everyone was super excited to see the work that they've been working on. And oftentimes you don't really get the behind the scenes of what it's really like in these industries, unless you're like us who are nerds for K-pop, anything K-pop or anything related to like pop culture in Asia generally. Not that I don't listen to like pop culture in America. Like I'm well versed in both areas, but for the sake of this conversation, I wanted to yeah, I'm a nerd, y'all, but I wanted to kind of like bring up that conversation about identity and why it's so important to make sure that whatever platform that you have, it's important to like be authentic and true to yourself. And I think K-pop is one of the areas where we see people making statements of wanting that for themselves in their own like on their own platform. Hence why I'm bringing up Blackpink. People have their opinions about the documentary. I, for one, think that the documentary was very tasteful. The documentary was very tasteful, and I feel like I did learn a lot about what they go through and like what they experience as a trainee within this vast industry that is a huge moneymaker. So everyone's thoughts about K-pop, I think, even as an outsider, these days it's like it's beyond music now. Like we have companies like Big Hit, who's hit public, which means a lot for them because that now shows the world that they're making money off of their artistry. They're making money off of what they're doing. This is their product, and they're selling merchandise off of it. Their artists have millions of dollars worth of net worth. Their CEOs, trillions of dollars in net worth. So you can definitely see that there's an economy behind K-pop, right? Automatically. And uh and that's prevalent in America as well. Like people associate money to hip hop, people associate money to pop artists like Drake and Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga, things like that. Like that's already well known, it's in our consciousness, like even in American pop music, but it's new. It's newer. It's a newer phenomenon happening in Korea. So we get that. We see that. That's why what's their names? Blackpink has a documentary on Netflix, a huge streaming platform where everyone can watch their documentary if you have a Netflix subscription. So that's pretty bomb in itself. Like y'all got networks, y'all got connects. You have a fandom, and there was a push for it. So therefore, that's why it exists. So enough about the logistic part. But now, like looking at the documentary, I had so much respect for these members, simply by the way that they came there, and I think they spoke up a lot about spoke up. Wow, they spoke up about a lot of issues that I guess as a regular K-pop fan you wouldn't really see that much of. When I say regular, I mean like consumer of their music. You consume K-pop like everyone else. You love the music, you love the dancing, you love everything in that nature. But a lot of people don't really take the time out to go a little bit deeper and learn about their artists from a more sentimental aspect of it all, right? Beyond like variety shows. So this documentary really enlightened me because yeah, I might have had my own judgments or like thoughts about Blackpink prior to that, and just being a K-pop fan in general, and also being a YG follower in general as well, like noticing the trajectory of their like top groups lately. I'm proud of them. I'm happy for them. I'm like excited for them to see what's gonna happen next for them. But that documentary also made me worried, and it was saddening at some points, and it made me feel sorry for them in some ways as well. Not simply just through the training experience, but I think also just what they want to do for themselves as young women in this industry that's very, how should I say, like you move this way, they tell you to move this way, you move that way. They tell you to move this way, you move that way. And I'm going to bring up Rose as an example because I don't want to be a spoiler for people who haven't seen the documentary. But Rose was very opening and very transparent about what she intended to do walking into this and what ultimately happened. And I can sense some sort of disappointment in her, and I can sense some sort of like regret. I don't know her personally. I would love to meet her because I feel like she's coming from a very authentic and true place simply based off of what she shared with us in her documentary. But like Chai has mentioned before, because we've seen the documentary together actually, and we've talked about it together, and we've had our own little mini sesh with some hot chocolate and coffee one day, just talking about the documentary because in Rose specifically, because Rose is a lyricist. She's experimentative when it comes to her own music that doesn't get shown at all, and it's I don't know. It's just like we honored, Rose as a member of Blackpink, but do people really know what Rose goes through, or Rosie, how she went as well in the documentary? Like, I didn't even know she had a cute nickname named Rosie. That's how I get excited about seeing their future because I know where they're coming from. Whereas I don't think a lot of K-pop artists have the opportunity to do so because at the end of the day, they have to be marketable. At the end of the day, they have to be seen as not relatable, but something that people can like aspire to be. And identity goes a long way with that because if a fan feels like they can relate to an artist, then how do you think people are going to invest in their music? How do you think people are going to invest in what they're doing, right? And I feel like now, like the industry has caught on to that. Like we're looking for more authentic connections to these artists. Like variety shows up the wazoo. I literally watched every variety show known to man related to my favorite K-drama actors and actresses, related to K-pop artists and things like that. Like they know what they're doing, okay? Trying to get my money, okay? Just watching and just being like enthused by what they're doing. At the end of the day, there are entertainers, but I would love to like get a single from Rose, and maybe one day she might go independent. Like who knows? Like, you know, like God forbid, because people love Blackpink and they would hate for them to ever leave. But I'm like, will there ever be an opportunity for her to do the music that she wants to do? And we saw a little bit of that. Oh my God, like just seeing her like being in the studio and like being shy and worried about how her music is going to be perceived by people. Can she even do it? You know what I'm saying? It was just so it was a lot for me. I love that. And I think we need to see more of that, especially when we're trying to represent people from other cultures, represent people who from other sexual identities, people who even have disabilities, mental disabilities, and you know, coming out about those things and like sharing it with society, making people feel like it's okay to feel this way. Like even with BTS and their music, you know, it hit a lot of people's hearts, and you know, because of the messages that they're sharing with young people about, you know, being true to yourself and things like that. But if we're going back to the flip side of it and where the toe fits into this and to where other people fit into this, it's like I see where you guys are going for the better, but also don't disenfranchise another group of people when everyone can be moving the same way. Everyone can still be pushing the needle in the same direction and render great outcomes. Not to say that it's not happening. Like we're gonna have a whole nother conversation about how should I say, about cultural appropriation and that as well, and how actually there are agencies really making the initiative to put people who are experts about disenfranchisement and things like that into the conversation and how their image is shaped around the world. But I know that Rai wants to jump in, and then Chai would also like to jump into that. Rai and Chai.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the Blackpink documentary, and I mean, we're like moving into a different conversation about identity now, like your kind of musical identity, how you feel most comfortable expressing yourself to an audience, right? And kind of similar to UK, one of the first emotions that I felt when I was watching the documentary, and one of the ones that lasted the longest afterwards, was kind of like it was bittersweet in a way. And I give props to the documentarians for, like, you know, taking the risk to go there and to not make it too glamorous. It's like, you know, no spoilers, but amazing what they've accomplished. And yet, you know, here are everything has two sides. And it made me think, particularly with regards to Rose, that her musical identity seems to be quite different from what Blackpink is selling. Nonetheless, she finds enjoyment in what Blackpink does do, you know. And I don't want to discredit that and act like, oh, she seems so sad in the documentary. Like, that's not it. You know, she clearly has worked really hard and she feels proud of what she's accomplished, and I think she deserves to feel that. But at the same time, the documentary made me think, one really great thing about the system in K-pop, it's hard to say that because there's so many downsides, but one good thing is, for people out there who don't know what kind of performer they want to be, but they just know they want to perform, that is an excellent outlet for that talent that you may have, and you don't have a particular leaning one way or the other. But on the other side of that, it's possible to take advantage of the fact that sometimes people are a little lost for a while. And if they're not sure of where they want to go, you can steer them one way or another, and in a sense contribute to them losing a bit of themselves. And so I feel that there are definitely two sides of that coin that were established in the documentary, that is this great thing for someone like, say, Lisa, who's like, I'm gonna dance. I'll dance to anything. Put some music on. Let's go. I want to be front and center. I was born to do this, and this could be almost anything. I've done this style of dance. I'm ready. And then Rose, who was very much like, I had this idea of who I was going to be and what I was going to say, but on the one hand, I was willing to do whatever it took to succeed, and on the other side of that, I was also scared to represent my true self. And so those two things together can work in tandem to create something that is inspiring and, extremely successful, like Blackpink. But I think that the documentary was so skillfully put together and that it allowed both of those feelings to coexist. So I would like to know Chai's thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I think both of you are touching on what I essentially was thinking about as well. Like they, especially if you think about like what you were saying, like between Lisa versus Rose having a certain element or a certain interest of themselves, and how the company is still putting a certain identity on them. And what I was thinking about as a way to add to the conversation, I don't want to be repetitive, but for all those, for example, Black individuals, or not even just Black, but just like anybody not Asian who want to be part of the K-pop industry, who want to go through this process of becoming a K-pop star or idol, that's something that I think that they have to understand or recognize or realize. If the company, or not even the company, but just if K-pop itself is not expanding enough to the point where they allow artists to be authentically 100% who they are. Because we can get it where, kind of similar to what Kay was saying, but in line with what Raya is saying, is that if you can have it where a Black individual can go through this rigorous process, because it could take years, right? And having an idea of what they're going to do, especially if they're thinking of Fatou. Like Fatou is setting kind of like, I don't want to say a benchmark, but an example of what it will be like. But at the same time, depending on the company that they're going into, if the company itself has a certain expectation of what this Black individual, and I'm saying Black because Black, but it could also be non-Western, non-Black, but in the Western hemisphere, if they have a certain image of them, they're going to cultivate them, mold them into that image to then market them, right? And so that's something that is really, I don't want to say, well, it is concerning, but that's something that people have to recognize, that I think this documentary illuminated. That Rose had a certain interest, but also a certain understanding of what she wanted to sing. But the company had molded her into the point. If you watch the documentary, I'm going to be a little bit of that bad person who's going to spoil a little bit. But but when there was a moment in the documentary where she was told to just sing whatever comes to your heart. And she couldn't do that. In the sense, like, I'm not saying she's unable to, like, she probably is able to, but she was trying to get the words out. And we were talking about this after we had watched the movie, when we were together. And something that I noticed was that, like, she was trying to get it out. And she says she does it better when there are people with her in the space, but she was trying very much. She was trying to say words, and all she could do was say voices. And I think part of that, or not even I think, it was a collective conversation. So I can't credit this next point that I'm going to say as my own, because I think it was cultivated by us talking. But what we realized was that because of the training period that essentially molded her to be part of this group, she lost, or maybe didn't fully develop, her own musical authenticity. So that's something that was, I don't want to say concerned about, but that's something that I want people who want to kind of break through the industry, the K-pop industry, who are not phenotypically Asian, that may be something that you will have to go through, or something that you will have to break out and like stomp down. And I want to, bring in a little bit, but not too much, because I don't know Jessie that well in terms of like her musical appearance. But I know that Jessie had to go through that as somebody who's born and grew up in, New Jersey, and I'm from New York, so we kind of similar. So I understand how she, how she rocking, how she rolling. And so for her, trying to break through to that and having to find a company that supports who she is, not going to a company that will give her the most money, right? Like, she had to find something that allowed her to still make the music that she wants to make in a country that may not necessarily embrace her. And so that's something that I'm not necessarily dealing with, but that's something I'm thinking about over and over in my head as we connect not only Jessie, but Rose, but also Fatel, but also people who are interested in being in K-pop but are not Asian. And I know later on, if we have the time, because I know we're reaching that 1 hour mark, we could also make a part 2 to this conversation. But also thinking about, how do Koreans and Japanese individuals, because Leia, we haven't talked about Leia, but she is Brazilian and Japanese, but not a lot of people are talking about her, because obviously Fatel is like kind of front and center. She's like, very phenotypically different. But somebody like her, Leia, who is also a foreigner, like thinking about her experience, as well as I'm also thinking of NCT and how they have members who are, one, were born or was raised in another country, so have the ability to speak English, or have, outside of Korea experiences. But then there are actual members in the group who are from another country. I'm thinking Yuta, who's Japanese. And I'm also thinking that they have a whole group full of Chinese characters, goddamn, idols. Chinese. I was gonna say characters again, idols. I'm gonna start talking, but I'm just thinking about them and their experiences as, not Korean, but that's also part of. I think all of us have touched on this, but we also know like the kind of the issues between South Korea, Japan, and China, and how that can also mold itself into those relations of how idols are treated. But that's also another interesting aspect for just foreigners in general to talk about. But yeah, that was my point. Sorry if I went long-winded. You all can always rewind to get what I was trying to say. But that was something I was thinking, and I'm glad, Kay, we were here. So jump in, Kay.
Nah, I just wanted to kind of like also like summarize what you were saying, because I think you made so many interesting points. How now we are noticing K-pop kind of is experiencing some sort of tension right now with representation and identity in the sound that they want to produce. Now that they've hit this kind of global culture, if you will, because not for nothing, NCT is video cultural technology, which I'm not entirely sure what that means, but based off of what I'm getting from that is that they're technically like trying to build a platform or a stage of idols or artists who come from different parts of the world, but that can carry kind of the force that K-pop has. No matter where you're from, you can still represent K-pop, and I think it's kind of like this burgeoning kind of like Asian power that's happening too. Like the East is definitely riding on this like huge economic wave, and it's riding on this huge music industry wave right now. Just based off of like the different genres of music that's coming up. Like we have K-pop, K-hip hop, Mando pop, we have J-pop, we have J-hip hop, we have all these derivatives of kind of already existing genre of music, but we're seeing strains of it. And I'm honestly looking forward to having a conversation about the origin of the sound and how might these um, derivatives of these sounds are either harmful from what it comes from, or is it moving? Are we moving into a time where music is no longer one type of thing? And we've had this conversation about pop music specifically related to a comment made by the producer uh, in the Blackpink documentary. He said a very interesting comment about why K-pop can't just be why do we have to say it's K-pop when it's just music? And boy oh boy, did we have some thoughts about that comment. And um not
Yeah.
throwing any shade, but I think that that says a lot because you let me not get into it because I'm
Mhm.
gonna save my voice
Right.
for that because I do have a lot of opinions about that and I wish we didn't have just like an hour to talk about this. But also I think you bring up a point, Sherry and Bernie. Oh, sorry, Sherry and Chai, about how, excuse me, Sherry and Chai. You bring up a good point about how now are we seeing K-pop kind of jumping the gun a little bit? Because if you
Mm.
haven't already addressed the multicultural issues that are happening in Korea, that's already been already kind of blown up to the extent where people, net citizens and international foreign populations that live in Korea right now are at a standstill about, okay, so what is my purpose here? And we all know how, not all know, but we can enlighten each other about how Korea became so globalized and how Korea became so big for us right now. Why is it in our vocabulary these days? Aside from K-pop, I feel like we're noticing something happening in Korea, and so I think that it what we're talking about comes with a lot of other things, simply just music, and we want to address that as well. But I definitely want to address how is Korea aware of the direction that they want to go to when it comes to music and entertainment, as that being um, a tool for cultural motivation and societal motivation, and everyone treating everyone equally, and we are coming into a world of understanding of one another. But are we seeing that there are others being left behind while others are being moved forward? Or are we seeing that K-pop is still an industry where it wants to preserve Korean identity, no matter where you may derive from? If you're not Korean, we're gonna try to project you as so as much as possible through these assimilation methods, that through language, all these other things. And I think that's a lot different in Japan because, like you mentioned, Chai, before, that sometimes these figures that we are claiming that are being tokens of a certain identity are being ignored and belittled or being treated unfairly in another country. Like, why are we all at different spectrums of the pool when it comes to representation and inclusivity and um, open-mindedness? So with that being said, I hope I was able to summarize that a little bit and share with you all the direction that we're planning on going to with this conversation. I do think that there might be another part for us, but Rye, I know that you want to wrap things up for us. So what do you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that that's actually a really great ending point for this particular episode because I feel like it opens a whole nother can of worms.
Yes.
And so I think we have a really great starting point for next week. I hope that everyone who was watching today kind of enjoyed engaging in the conversation. Special shout out to Sherry for all the comments.
And Millette. Thank you so much, Millette.
Yes, Millet, all the like very, very insightful comments there have been really encouraging, I think. Um, and then I also just think that we have a great jumping off point here, and I hope that you guys will kind of stick around, come back next week, and we can talk about this new broader topic of, what is K-pop and how does that label matter and why.
Mhm.
But Anyway, thank you all for, tuning in, I guess. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.